All right, traders. Well, welcome to a kind of quick Sunday night video. We'll make this. I was doing some traveling this weekend, and my flight got back a couple hours ago. So I just kind of jumped into the office because I did want to set up my new computer. I know that we've been having this screen flashing issue in Zoom. So this new computer, I did test it a little while ago, and I did not see any screen flashing. So hopefully that's the end of that issue. It's what I suspected was just that I'm running so many things on my one computer that I just needed an upgrade. So we'll see how that goes. But I wanted to go through and talk about what we're seeing in the technicals, just talk about a little bit about last week. We had a big week for the overall market. This week, and we had a lot of Fed speak last week, a lot of things like that. Testimony from Powell was front and center last week. It sounds like they're setting up for a rate cut, but that doesn't mean I think that, just because that the Fed has the markets back for now, it doesn't mean that we go straight up in a line. I went through a lot of charts over the last couple of hours. Man, there's a lot of things that have really blown out to the upside. And we went over that in the Thursday chart forum. So, if you missed that, you can go ahead and take a look at that on the private Twitter feed. I sent that out. That was Thursday, right? Thursday night, was it? Yeah, I believe Thursday night that we did that chart forum. And, so this market has been pleasantly surprising me, that the fact that we're continuing to march up. Not everything went up on Friday. The healthcare stocks really have gotten beat up a bit. There was kind of a big difference between what healthcare providers, managed care companies, hospitals, and pharma companies. So, not everything has been kind of blowing out to the upside. And I'm going to talk about names. I did put together a watch list for this weekend, but I see the majority of names going through my screeners and saying, geez, things have really run up quite a bit. So you could see that I've got up in front of you just the calendar for this week's earnings. We're really going to be accelerating very quickly into earnings season. Citigroup is the first one that reports. Always the banks are the first groups, the first group that reports. And then, there's a mix of other names. We're going to get some of the FANG names towards the end of the week, Microsoft, as we go through. But just names that jump off the page to me. J&J reports, Domino's, which could be an interesting report. Of course, Citigroup, JP Morgan, Goldman, Wells Fargo, CSX reports, which could be a name to play this week. And I'm just realizing I'm not including in my watch list Morgan Stanley, so I'll update. PGR, which has been a real nice name this year. You get Abbott, which I think will also be an interesting report. ISRG reports. So it's a pretty full week, right? We get a couple of the newer names, Chewy. We get CrowdStrike, which has been a name that's been off to a really good start. Microsoft reports, and I think that's it. But man, it's a full week. It is a full week of earnings. KSU is another name, BlackRock. So Honeywell, which I think the chart looks pretty good in Honeywell. Of course, it is pretty high. So let's get into some charts. I like to go over the index charts. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I look for. I was talking about some names that worked pretty well for me at the end of the week. Some new ads like Home Depot did really well. Cyber's off to a good start, knock on wood, of course, with all these names. I added CVX. So I want to go over what, kind of what I look at. Sometimes it's like as soon as I see a chart, I know whether or not it's going to qualify for me for something that I'm looking at. So I'll go over a couple of those criteria in case you're kind of new to the room and you're wondering, of course, what constitutes, what are these names for me to add? Because sometimes, it's in the kind of the heat of the moment. I do like to add more positions at the end of the day, but sometimes if I really like a setup, I'll kind of leg into it. And if it works really well, sometimes I don't really need to add something at the end of the day because it's already working very well. So, sometimes my thoughts kind of change over the day. But first things first, let's go over the indices and let's just check where they are. I'll go over a couple sentiment things. And why don't I do that first before we look at the averages? Let's talk a little bit about sentiment, right? So this is not what I want. I want fear and greed. We're moving on up, right? I mean, fear and greed is now 64, 100 is maximum, but we're in the greed territory, and I think we covered that a couple times, through last week. The components of this, one of the things that I think they even have in here is the VIX. They've got the fear and greed over time. But junk bond demand, what I look at, so they look at junk bonds versus investment grade. There's not any warning signs here. I also look at treasuries, right? Credit spreads, 5 year, I think 3 to 5 year treasuries over high yield bonds, which this is duration matched. They both have a duration of about 5. So, there's not anything really telling us here. There's no, major kind of perk up in risk that I see. One of the things that I saw, what else we got here? Put call ratio got probably a little bit too bullish in the middle of last week. I think we covered that in the chart forum webinar. We talked about how the put call ratio got to be a 0.5, so it got really bullish. Again, it doesn't mean that we're going to have a pullback, but to me, it's just kind of a place to take a little bit more profits. I think Helene Meisler always has some really good charts to go through that she posts over the weekend. One of the things that I thought was interesting is she's got the insider transaction ratio. Now, granted, this only goes back a year. I don't know if this is a seasonality thing. I tried to look for this on Bloomberg. Unfortunately, they don't publish this, just to go out a little bit further than a year, because this is from Barron's that publishes this. But yeah, I mean, it's spiking up pretty decently out of nowhere. This thing has come out like a vengeance in July. So again, I don't know if this has something to do with, maybe a little bit before an earnings cycle. I don't know, but it's one of those things that is standing out to me that is, you could see is flashing bearish, right? That insiders are selling at this point. Something different, right? Something that we have not seen. And that's something that I tend to look for is, things that kind of come out of nowhere. While I'm at it with her feed, she does look at this Citigroup Panic Euphoria Index. Notice it's right square in the middle of this. So it's kind of like the fear and greed index. It's starting to tick up, but it's not extreme greed. I think if you kind of go through the VIX as well, talk a little bit about that. That's flashing to me a very low reading at this point. Again, it doesn't mean that we're going to just jump right up, but it's telling you that, right now premiums for hedges are cheap. So, if you wanted to, you could. It is a little bit cheaper to put on a hedge right now. So let's go through. So again, I don't see a ton of things other than that insider sales ratio. I don't see a ton of warning signals, right, in the market. We could look at as well, what's kind of the final thing that I like to look at is breadth. So look at the advanced decline. We could look at this for the S&P. We could also look at this for NYSE stocks. But, this is, this again is very strong, right? I guess if you really wanted to be a contrarian, you could see that eventually this is going to go down. But this is this is confirming, right? This would be more interpreted as a warning signal if breadth was not making an all-time high as the overall S&P is making an all-time high. But this is what you want to see, right? Is breadth confirming a breakout. So that's what we've got here. Notice on Monday, I think we were talking about, CNBC, they were all bearish on last Monday, basically a week ago. And we basically have green candles every day since then. So really strong. We are breaking out here, making new highs. This is into uncharted area, which is a good thing, that we don't have any overhead resistance. William O'Neill's books, talk about, um, these are really good things when we have market breaks out, when the market is breaking out and there's no overhead resistance. Again, very, very strong looking. The Qs, we could look at this as well, also breaking out. Before we go on to the Qs, I do want to talk about levels to watch for this week. So you can jot these down. I'll try to throw these in on the private Twitter feed a little bit later too. But basically, your support for the week is going to be 3,002, right? So right now we're at 3,014. You can see S&P futures are not really moving much since futures have opened here. I actually don't see a lot of things other than Bitcoin, which has taken a decent leg down tonight or this weekend. But 3,002 is going to be the top of value. If we move over to the Qs, that is going to be, we're going to be opening up right around the top of value. 193.58 is the level to watch there. NASDAQ futures are going to be a little bit different. So again, they're going to open up right around the top of value. IWM is going to, now there was a weird print last week, so maybe we'll look at Russell futures. Russell futures, we're also going to be opening up right around the top of value. And again, so this is, IWM is the one that's not participating. I am due to go on Bloomberg on Monday, and I might be talking about an IWM trade for a catch-up trade. Remember what the biggest components of IWM, whenever you're analyzing an ETF, you always want to look at, in my opinion, right? And of course, there's videos for information purposes only, as all of them are. I'm not giving out any recommendations. But what I tend to look at is in any ETF, not just the name, but what the top weights are. In this case, it's banks, biotech, software is a decent portion of this. Retail, REITs are a big portion of this as well. So it's not just banks. When we talk about financials being the biggest weight of the small cap ETF, it's also REITs. And biotech is up there as well. If you want to look at the names, of course, there's 2,000 names in here, but you could see names like Array, Deckers, I see, is also up here. Chegg, HAE is up here. RDN. So in any event, this could be really interesting. On where prices right now is at the top of value. So this little consolidation here, I'm hoping that this resolves itself to the upside. Where would it not work? And I apologize if my font is a little bit small here, so I'll just blow this up a little bit. I think this is a new setting because I'm on a new computer, which you're going to see a bunch of things that maybe look a little bit different. 155.27 is going to be the level to watch for this week. So again, I might try maybe a call spread in IWM to see if this can kind of rip higher, and that would be a nice confirmation of the overall rally. But for the week, I would watch 156. Looks like it's going to be right around 156. Yeah, 156.10. Call it, right? This does look like it's updated from the 1 hour. Again, 1 hour chart's very good to watch. Nice support and resistance levels for the week, right? Because you have that 1 hour. That 1 hour bar is good for the whole week for the value area. All right, so that's that. Just looking at a couple other things like bonds. Bonds sold off quite a bit towards the end of the week. Notice that they hit a couple of epochs down there. So I would be looking for a continuation to the downside. We are right at the bottom of value, so we'll see if that can hold. This did satisfy the 80% rule. We went all the way through here. Now let's see what we do here at the bottom of value. All right, so I think that'll be interesting to watch. And remember, there's consequences when bonds really start to move quickly. Now, if they move slowly, maybe not that big of consequences for equities. But if TLT continues to drop or ZB continues to drop and yields go up, that should be good for the banks. It probably won't be that great for utilities and high dividend yielding stocks like REITs. So we'll just kind of have to keep an eye on how quickly that moves, because we did have a really big move after the 30-year auction that happened on Thursday. Bonds moved down quite a bit. Also gold. I think gold is kind of interesting here. It is forming this kind of consolidation, possibly a bull flag here, pennant, something of that nature. Gold, let's see how gold opened up tonight. Yeah, up 36 basis points. And if you start to look at, so here's where I'll get into some individual charts. I want to go through the sectors really quickly, just so you can kind of see also, we talked about market breadth and the advanced decline line. I want to go through sectors really quick, just so you can visualize what sectors are looking the strongest, or what names might be a little bit stretched, what sectors also might be ripe for, looking for the next leg or the next group to outperform. But this is GLD. I want to look at GDX. GDX is pushing towards the top of value and trying to break out, right? So I am still long a little bit of GDX. I added to that trade once I thought we were starting to resolve to the upside. I took one target, did not take anything else, but I'm pretty far out in GDX. I am out to, and I'm gonna cover my open positions as well, but I'm in November 26.5 calls. Again, not a huge position, but I'm participating. Names that I like in here, KL, this is Kirkland Lake. This has been one of the best names out of that gold mining group. So I do like KL. I'm going to add this one into the watch list too, as well as Morgan Stanley. But let's quickly, so we covered GDX. I mentioned banks will be sensitive if rates move down, if rates move up a little bit further and TLT moves down. So just make sure I'm recording here. Yeah, I'm recording. So I mentioned this chart on Friday. So yeah, I mean, this is really, at this point, would I be looking to put an XLF position on? Only if I really think the banks are going to outperform for their earnings. I don't know if that's going to happen. Citigroup will be the first one out. I think a couple of you may have put that Morgan Stanley trade on. That's the name that I like best out of this group. I think that it's kind of been depressed a little bit. I don't think it's run up, and it's just coming out of consolidation. So I like this versus 43.90. Remember, Morgan Stanley reports I think at the end of the week. So you've got a couple days if you want to see. It's going to move with the rest of the banks. So that's one name that I like in that group. Let me continue going through with the sectors. Let's go through a couple of the material names first. This is XLB. I see a lot of sideways action. I don't really have a reason to really go much into this group. XME is another group. This one saw a lot of call buying. I made some money on a swing trade with this one, but it's just not jumping off the page to me. It is still in a downtrend, so it'll remain kind of on my watch, something to watch list. XLE, the energy ETF, I talked about. I added a trade in CVX. So here's, kind of what I wanted to get into a little bit about what I really like when I take a position. Basically when a name hasn't done much for a long time, so is this really giving me a buy signal, or is it jumping off the page to me? I would say it's not jumping off the page to me, but I think it's worthwhile a shot in this, and that's why I put on a small trade. Because what do I see here? I see that the name is getting above value, right? Above 125.13. So I'm looking for a breakout of this range. And I also see this VPOC up here. So I think it's got good risk to reward, considering if it does get going, maybe we could see a move up to 132. Or 131 and change, call it 131.50. The other thing that's nice about CVX options, they're damn cheap. And that's also, so what did I go into? I went into August options, and, so it's like much cheaper than a software name, a FANG name, a tech name. So if I go to, just look at these, yeah, I mean, the implied volatility is like around a 16, 1.6. Not 60. So, that also kind of compelled me with looking at the chart. I know how cheap the options are. So it just seemed like it was a decent, like I said, risk to reward. because the implied volatility is less than the S&P for this thing, or right around the S&P, I should say. All right, so we talked a little bit about energy, gold miners, talked about a name or two that I liked in there. Let's go through the rest of the sectors. Let me go through the defensive ones. XLP is hitting a 52-week high. The name that I like in this group, Mondelez, even though it's kind of trapped inside value. XLU, I think interesting to watch in XLU. But like I said, if rates start, and I'm not saying rates are going to, I'm not saying TLT is going to fall further, but if it does, this is not a group that I would want to be in. I did take more of this Dominion Energy trade-off. It just hasn't been doing anything. I'm still holding a little bit of the position, but that's one name that I think is interesting within the group. Sticking with, high dividend sectors, IYR REITs, they're a little bit off the high, also very dividend sensitive. USMV, which is low volatility equities, still making a 50 up at near making a 52 high. I think of this group, I feel like I'm not going to chase up here with this group, but maybe in my long-term account, if this happens to pull back maybe to 62.40, I might be putting this ETF on in my long-term account. All right, so just continuing with the sector and subsector ETFs, XLV, pretty beaten up. In this group, I mean, J&J got smoked on Friday and has been weak. But you go back to this XLV ETF, it is not making 52-week highs. It's just not doing it, for me in the charts either. IBB, just also, the whole biotech ETF, just not looking great to me. Inside value. So again, how do I judge that? Why it's not looking good to me? Because it tried to get above value and it fell back into it, right? When it falls back into value, it's now back in the range, right? So I don't know how long it will be range bound for, but when things are in value to me, they're kind of neutral. I don't want any part of them unless I'm looking for a move, through value. And I don't see any major reason to go short, to look for a move through all the way to the bottom of value. That doesn't seem attractive to me either. XBI, same thing. It's now, back consolidating at the top of value. Out of the three ETFs of the biotech and healthcare, XBI is probably most interesting. If it happens to hold in here, maybe it could finally see that push up to 92, but just hasn't been able to do it. One more subgroup, and this would be medical devices, IHI, definitely relative strength out of that one. IHF almost took out that VPOC up there. We talked about UNH. I thought this VPOC gets taken out. Just having an issue with Thinkorswim, but there's one right here at 267. So I think we did a great job with that one, thinking that there would be continuation after Thursday. And sure enough, Friday was a big day as well for UNH. Let's go through industrials. I like this chart. I think this looks interesting. You've got a couple big names reporting in the group. You've got Honeywell. Boeing ticked up a little bit towards the end of last week, but I like this Honeywell chart. Am I going to be playing this for earnings? Probably not. If it sinks a little bit, maybe I'll be a buyer in there. But I think Honeywell right now is best in breed. But there's a couple other names that look pretty good too. Ingersoll Rand does not look bad either. Sticking with this, they do put the defense names under industrials. I think GD looks great. I did take this trade off on Friday. Why? Because I was just looking to take off a little bit of risk going into the weekend. I'm going to talk about my overall market thoughts in just a second, but I think this GD, if it happens to pull back a little bit, I'll probably be back into it. Why? Because I think it looks great on multiple time frames. I think on the weekly chart, this thing looks really good. Really nice looking bar. Let's just look at XLI here. Yeah, I mean, XLI is pushing the top of value. That does not look bad. So that might be a group to take a look at for next week. I'm going to add XLI to the watch list. That's just how sometimes it goes. Sometimes you start reviewing charts and so forth, and you come up with a couple other names. Let's go to, I think we covered most of the sectors. Let's hit technology up. So XLK, of course, very strong. Oh, and consumer discretionary, but hit a 52-week high, very strong looking. IGV, also very strong looking as well. Any check back, if we get a check back to the top of value, that's where I'll be a buyer at this point. Right? We really haven't had that. That would be a great looking buy signal, I think, if we get a check back to top of value. And at this point, I think that's what I'm waiting for in this group. Same thing with XLK. If you want to look at the FANG, this is going to be a good segue into consumer discretionary, because the internet ETF also has, it's a combination of tech and consumer discretionary, but also very strong looking. The FANG stocks are your biggest weights in this one. So that'll be it. And I did position in this one in the beginning of last week. I took it off. Who knows? If we get some type of a dip, maybe I throw that right back on. So again, something I'm watching with that one as well for next week. A few other groups. This is the cybersecurity group, very strong. I'm going to go into a couple individual names, but I want to keep going through the sectors. This is consumer discretionary. Look at that candle on Friday. Very, very strong and finally getting overbought. So I think I covered most of the sectors and subsectors. Carry regional banking. It's kind of why I like IWM here. Regional banks look like they're trying to break out or trying to break the 200-day moving average. They're also above value after a very thin looking value area for the month of July. So could be setting up for a decent move, but I do think rates need to go up further for this to happen. And that means TLT has to go down. Last one, maybe SMH, semiconductors, very strong bar on Friday as well. Pretty risk-on day, I would say, overall. And then one more, XRT. XRT is still below the 200-day moving average, but this also had a decent week and a nice bar on Friday. So that's the retail ETF. All right, so I think that's pretty good. Solar's a group I'm going to talk a little bit about as well. So overall view, you could see a lot of these sectors for the, and again, I think a lot of traders really position in technology. The equally weighted tech ETF is out to 52-week highs. So we're getting, I don't want to say bubbly, but these groups, which again, big, if you look at the weighting in the S&P, tech is the biggest weighting, right? So, and as well as consumer discretionary is a very large weighting as well. These groups are really, the leaders are extending. I think really involves trade management at this point on your holdings and making sure that you're taking targets and then moving trailing stops up. But I think initiating a lot of new trades in here, I think is pretty tough to do without some type of a little bit of a dip or a cool off. And I think that's my market view, for the week is that, hey, we've got a whole lot of earnings reports the next couple weeks. I think for me, it's going to be kind of taking it easy with adding new positions. I still have a decent amount of risk on. So again, it's going to be a lot of trade management. Not going really strong into some new positions. I would like to say I'm seeing a ton of setups that could really, accelerate, but I think we've seen that the last couple of weeks. So if the trade is not there, or if I'm not feeling like it's a great place to add a ton of risk, I'm not going to force it. There's no reason to give back some of the profits from the last couple of weeks, right? The last couple of weeks have been great for profit wise and so forth, and managing all the different events that we've gotten. But I don't think that we need to force the issue going into earnings season. So let me go over some charts that I do think are interesting. And I'm going to send this out, of course, as I always do. But let's talk a little bit about one of the airlines that reported, right? American already reported, right? Wasn't that the one? Or no, it was Delta, excuse me. Delta reported. They had a nice move. This chart's not bad for Delta. Also 52-week high, but I tend to like American out of this group as possibly a catch-up trade. You know, there's a VPOC up here. There's another one up here at 36, poking its head above value and a pretty long base. So that's one name I would add to my watch list. I can tell you right now, am I going to be adding this trade? No, but I like the setup, right? So you know, I've got close to 20 names. And the way it works, right, is if you like one of these names, please do not wait for me to put the trade on. I'm merely pointing out setups that I think look pretty decently, but there's no way I'm going to be adding all these names. I'm just trying to, you know, find some nice setups in case you guys are a little bit underweight equities, and if you're looking to kind of establish some new positions, these are ones that I think look potentially fairly good. BZUN, this is probably best in breed out of the Chinese internet names. It's done really well, and it's consolidating here. So this one I'm tempted to go ahead and put on a position. They don't report till August. Also, some of the swing names that I'm looking at, it helps when names don't report earnings right away. So I'll make sure that I mention that. So that's BZUN. Also CMG, you've heard me talk about a lot. They're going to be reporting very soon, not this week, but next week. You could maybe think about a call spread or maybe selling some premium just for this week. But this is pushing. It's pushing to break out here. And I think once it gets going, has a chance to keep going. So that one's definitely on my watch list. CVX, I mentioned that one. I also mentioned Cyber. So again, this is running into positions that I already own, but I think this thing looks really good if it can maintain that top of value. So again, very simple setup, which I like always. Very simple setups. You got a new, take a look at the MACD on this thing. Notice that it's been kind of running down, even though the stock's been going up. Well, it just fired off a bullish crossover right when after it's been consolidating for a couple months. So I'm long. I put this with my stop of 125. You know, I got in here. So I will be, once this is confirmed that we're above value, I will be using 132.50 as my new stop price. But again, if you haven't gotten into it, this is one of my favorite setups. And who knows, maybe I add a little bit of a call position onto that one because I'm long stock in this one. DRI, just to talk about a couple of the restaurants. We talked about Chipotle. This is Darden. Darden looks like it's trying to break out as well. So, and again, could be onto some open road, right? No previous resistance in DRI. A name that you haven't heard me talk about too much. I think this is setting up pretty well. I'm actually going to put an alert on it right now because I don't have one in place. But 5 below, I'm going to put an alert at 130. We'll call it 131, just a little bit above value. So again, why do I like this setup? A lot of consolidation, and I would be looking for a breakout of value. Right? So that's what I'm looking for in a lot of my setups is consolidation and then a break higher. So I've got an alert set now on that one, ready to go on 5. Not putting anything on just yet, but I would really like that if it confirms that move higher. FND, Floor & Decor. This has been on the watch list multiple times. It's working if you got into it. It looks great. Sticking with this group, the home construction group, this has a lot of home builders in it. It looks pretty darn good. And if you look at the weekly chart, it's got open road to about almost 44 bucks. And if you go back to the daily, so 44, you know, if it gets out of this range, I think it looks pretty good. So one of my favorite groups. This one, I think you would need rates to stay where they are. And of course, I got long Home Depot, managed that trade a bit on Friday. So there's Home Depot breaking out 52-week highs. I'm going to try to stay with that one. I also like Lowe's with that VPOC up there. All right. I think we covered a few more of these. Planet Fitness, another name that really has been sitting in consolidation for a while. It's got to get, you know, so this could be a move. It's at 77. Could try to play it for a couple dollar move to resistance. But again, I would be looking for this thing to break out. So you could play it for a couple dollars, and then maybe take a target at the top of value and then look for a move higher. Next, Square. Love what this thing is doing. Love the break on nice high volume too, out of resistance. So really nice with this one, right? We talked about how I chased, right? You know, sometimes it's impossible to get the very, I think, you know, a couple traders in the room did great. They managed to get this bar, which was what, Monday? But look at what it's done since. So chasing, you know, or waiting till it confirmed, you know, of course it's tough when it has such a big green bar like this, but look at what it's done since. It's up $5 since that first candle. So congrats if you played that with me. It's also above value on the weekly. So how I would play this going forward if you did not get into this with me, maybe if it checks back a little bit, what's that level on the weekly? 75.40, right? So if it checks back to the top of value, great, that would be a great entry, I think. Solar. So this is the TAN ETF on the weekly bar. You know, again, when you zoom out here, this thing has been sideways for a long time. So I like the ETF. I also like RUN. But we'll switch back to notice that this is now decently above value on the weekly chart. Daily, it's putting in a pennant here. So this is also top of my watch list. All right, so I'll rate these in just a second. Twitter is another one. Twitter's now above value. That's interesting to me, right? We're going to have earnings not this week, but next week, I believe. But watch for Twitter to kind of extend here. I like it is now something that a new name on the Tribeca Trade Group watch list. All right, and then one final one is ES. You don't get big pullbacks into this one. You know, it's 79.54, top of value. All right, so my favorite ones out of these groups, I think we covered about a little over 15 names. I think for next week, oh, I've got one more name. Why don't I have this one on the list? Salesforce, another name to watch. So I'm getting very interested in Salesforce here. That's also above value. So I would say, you know, 5 names that I really like for next week. I think CRM, CMG, Bison, right? So was that 3? I like ITB, and that's an ETF for that one. And then what was the 5th one that I saw? 5? Yeah, and I think 5 below if it breaks out. So again, that one has not triggered yet. All right, guys, so that's it for this weekend's video. Thanks for your patience. I'll get this out shortly to you. It's going to take a little while to render, but I'll have it out to you shortly. You could also watch it tomorrow morning. Thanks very much for watching. Again, I think it's going to be all about the earnings this week. So we're going to be positioning a little bit lighter with taking new positions, but those are the names that I like the best. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, guys.